Hi, Steve.
Hi, Jim.
Do you remember? It's been probably about a year ago. We did an episode where you were trying to convince me that I should adopt the genre term jangle pop.
Well, yes, I do, Jim. I thought that was a very helpful episode for you.
Well, as we dive into college radio music today, I'm trying to keep this straight just to make sure we don't step on that. All early jangle pop is college radio music, but not all college radio music is jangle pop. Do I have that right?
As confusing as that is, I think you do. Hello and welcome to Two Guys Talking About Records. That final community podcast about two guys talking about records and making good points about a lot of things that you might not know about, or maybe you do know about, forgot about. I don't know. But yeah, today's episode we're very excited about because it's like a woo going back in time here to some of our favorite albums.
Yep.
But I am Steve, a record collector.
And my name's Jim, and I own a record store, and I was a 1980s college radio DJ on top of it. So that's why the term college radio music is kind of a hard one for me to bypass, Steve. As difficult as that balance is of jangle pop, I'm going to stick with that old term for a while in today's episode.
All right. Go ahead, you old bastard, you.
All this at the same time, suffering from a little bit of oxygen deprivation because of all the wildfire smoke we've had here in mid-Michigan. It's been a crazy couple days. Today, as of the recording of this, it's nice out and sunny. So let's hope that we've got a reprieve of that for a while.
I've seen some crazy pictures there of yellow. I mean, the world is yellow.
Pretty
Very
much. There's a Dead Milkman song called Smoking Banana Peels. Yellow, I feel yellow.
Yeah.
Oops, I forgot I even have the shirt today
There
to
we
go
go.
with that.
Perfect, Jim.
But yeah, as Steve mentioned, we are going to delve into the world of 1980s college radio music. This is one near and dear to my heart, and I know yours as well, Steve. So this should be a fun one, and I think we're going to have to really do our best to rein this in to keep it around an hour just because. Yeah. And there's a few other things I want to talk about as well as our pickups, which I neglected to grab. So I'll grab them while you're doing your pickups. That's just been that kind of a day. But we did have that the concert last week. We talked with Bobby Balderrama from the Mysterians, and Mysterians, a couple of weeks ago. And then last Sunday, the 12th of July, we had that big concert in Bay City, and I just kind of wanted to give you a little update because it was an interesting day. It was a great day. I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on. We had a lot of fun, and there was a nice big crowd there. And I think I mentioned too that I'll show a couple. For those of you watching, I'm going to show some pictures. Those of you listening, it's called imagination. Do your best. I'll do what I can to illustrate them. But we had a decent crowd, and Steve, I got to MC the event. And I've talked to larger crowds before. I've introduced acts before, but this I think was by far the largest crowd that I've ever spoken in front of. There was probably 2,000 to 3,000 people there. The picture that I'm showing of Bay City's Winona Park on the riverfront, it's a big space. And there was a lot of people there, and it was very sunny and hot, 85 degrees. So this picture is not quite doing the justice because it's showing a lot of people up toward the stage, and they're in the sunshine, but in the back there's a pavilion that's in the shade, and there's about that same amount of people back there as well. So it was a huge event, and it was a ton of fun. And there was a band called the Prospect Brass Band that showed up there, and they were actually, I don't have any shots of them, but that was a very cool band. They were an 8-piece brass band, tuba and everything. And they played some original, which I think was very kind of reminiscent of Miles Davis jazz. That was kind of cool. So I'll have to steer you some links on those guys. But then they ended up with an all brass cover of Hey Jude by the Beatles that just had the crowd just, nah. It was actually very, very cool. Then Larry McRae was there also, and he performed a few songs, and as always, Larry kicks it out just good. He's great blues. we are trying to get Larry. We're getting him scheduled at some point to come on and talk about modern blues, and we'll do that at some point as well. The main attraction, though, was the Mysterians with Question Mark. I got a picture here as well with Bobby at the event. We talked with Bobby Balderrama, the lead singer from the or lead guitarist rather, from the Mysterians, and with him in this picture is Pete Woodman, who is the drummer for the day. Pete has played with the Mysterians on and off through the years, and an early incarnation of the Mysterians he sat in when their original drummer had been in a car accident. But Pete is more better known as the original drummer for the Bossmen, another great Michigan garage rock band that had Mark Farner in it in the earlier days, went on to become Grand Funk, but Pete was in the Bossmen with that kind of getting stuff started. So it was a really cool event, and I've got one more shot here of the Mysterians. So you'd figure, Steve, with a 60th anniversary of 96 Tears, that we would expect Question Mark in the Mysterians, right? And I think your question was, so how was Question Mark? And this was
Question Mark.
Question Mark. This was quite the interesting thing. Again, it was a 3-hour show, and the Mysterians took the stage at the end and started playing. They did a cover of Old Time Rock and Roll by Seeger. And as of them taking the stage and starting their set, Question Mark had not shown up yet. And this was a great big, and no pun intended, question mark on what was going to happen with the afternoon, because he has the reputation of being a bit eccentric. How's that? Is that a good way to put it? So he said he was going to be there. All of the pre-press stuff that we did said he was going to be there. And come the show time, he hadn't shown up. Come the start of the set, he hadn't shown up. And after they got a couple songs in, somebody showed up and went out and started singing the part of Question Mark. And it turns out that this was his grandson, wearing big old sunglasses and a hat. I'm questioning whether or not there was some in the crowd that didn't know the difference. He went out and he sang great. There was a lot of woos and rock and roll and 96 Tears, but what had happened was, I guess Question Mark is suffering from some very serious health issues and was advised by his doctor to really avoid high temperature situations and sunshine like that. So end result was, it was a great show with the Mysterians, and Question Mark family members stepping in and carrying the mantle forward. That said, it was still a great show, and it was still a great event. And I think a lot of people ended up having some fun with that. So I'm happy that that did happen and that we were a part of it. And it was really kind of cool to be a part of. It's just that it would have been great to have that band together one last time, if that's in case what this is going to be and what it might end up being.
Yeah, that's too bad. But at least the show went on.
The show went on, and like I said, even with compared to you and I, these guys aren't spring chickens anymore. And Bobby was really adamant about that. There's comes a time when you probably just can't quite get out there anymore. And unfortunately that went. But again, the city showed up, folks showed up. It was a great time. The other two bands, or the brass band and Larry McRae, just absolutely kicked it out, and folks had a good time in the sunshine, which is what is important.
Good deal. Yeah. Yep.
So,
absolutely.
Well, we'll keep working on that. Before we get to the big subject at hand, let's do our regular pickups for the week. You, sir, have a package headed your way. I think I sent you some tracking on that, so you'll have a couple of other goodies in the week to come. But what do you got this week to show off?
Well, we'll start off with a first off, it's a good album, but there'll be a big bitch with it. The name of the group is Deary, and the album's called Birding, and they're out of the UK. More of a dream poppy shoegaze thing. I ordered this off Amazon. It really wasn't available in any of the US stores that I was looking at. So it comes in. All of a sudden, I get a package in a paper bag. The paper bag.
Oh no.
And
oh no.
They had this, and this thing, the cover is just crushed. It is bent up everywhere. There's a slit in here, but every corner's bent. The side of it's all bent. It's just a record album doesn't do well in a paper bag through the
No.
Postal Service.
With a label
And
smashed on top of it.
yeah, and I mean the album's fine. The album's fine, but the whole cover's crap. And this wasn't a cheap album because I had to get it, from overseas from
Oh, and
UK.
it came from the
Uh,
UK in a paper bag. Oh
yeah,
no.
through Amazon, whatever, whoever
Oh.
seller that they're dealing with. So, God bless it. Yeah. So I've already put in to have it returned. It's kind of a pale blue type of vinyl. I got 30 days to return it, so I have 30 days to play it, decide if I want to pre-order the thing. So,
And
alrighty
then
then, there we
toss it
go.
toss it in your Discogs want list for a US seller with a good rep.
Yeah, yeah, that was terrible. It was awful. An album that's been on my want list for a long time finally came available in the U.S. on Discogs at a good price. It's the very first Church album
Oh, cool.
of Skins and Heart. And I have been wanting this because a lot of punk compilations they have the Unguarded Moment. It's on so many punk compilations from the Church, the Unguarded Moment. And it's not like the Milky Way. This is
Mhm.
definitely rockier and punkier. And so I have been trying to get it. It just goes for stupid money. And then there suddenly was a newer seller, which that's the thing. Newer sellers generally are cheaper. I mean, but you're taking that. Are they legit? Are they good? Or were they whatever?
Are they going to send it in a
So
paper
far,
bag?
I've had,
Yeah.
yes. So far, I've had good luck with them. So I was finally able to get the very first Church album. Now, I only have one other album from them, the one with Under the Milky
Yep.
Way. Uh, Obviously, in the U.S., their hit.
Yep.
That's it.
And that's
But
that's very goth-ish, that 80s kind of goth feel, like The Cure almost. That entire album, as I recall.
yeah, it does have that kind of stuff. I just so delighted to finally get it. It's from 1981
Cool.
that came out. And final two, I could save them for next week. We got a lot to show today. We'll just show this one. I'll show those there two for next week. It looks all black. So even if you're watching this on screen, you really can't see a damn thing. It is the soundtrack from the movie Arrival by Johan Johansson. Again, on my want list for a long time. I had this and I lost it. And so I really liked it and I wanted to bring it back in, black vinyl. And it finally came up at a good price again. It's been on my want list. And so I was able to get this thing. Good movie. About spaceship, about aliens coming down to
Yeah.
Earth, a kind of a monolith or whatever, trying to communicate.
Yep.
And the original album cover had a picture of the spaceship and everything on here. This one's all black except for Arrival and with raised embossing on there of the inside picture, which is kind of what the aliens,
Yep.
how they were talking.
Very cool.
So beautiful music. And what I really liked is he had Max Richter's on The Nature of Daylight. It's the very last one, but to me, that's one of the most beautiful songs of Max Richter ever just done. So got that in. So that's two items off my want list that finally, I mean, they've been there for a few years and just, I didn't want to pay those prices or not available in the U.S. by any sellers.
Well, cool.
Happy to get them. Yep.
So for my pickups this week, I only have two. You remember a couple of weeks back when I showed off the Bauhaus BBC compilation? And I said that paired with the other Bauhaus greatest hits compilation that I've got is all the Bauhaus I need. I really don't need any other ones.
It's completist time.
Well, no, not quite, but you know how that goes. I picked up a copy of The Sky's Gone Out, original version of this from 1982. And this is such a great album. You know, we talked about kind of that moody 80s goth that was kind of the offshoot of post-punk that Bauhaus was known for. before they got. I always say Love and Rockets maybe got a little poppier. I know that's not always the case. It's not a popular, but Bauhaus themselves, very good stuff. And this nice version of this came through. It's in really nice shape. So I was like, you know what? Yeah, I do have those compilations, but this is another one to have. So happy to have added that into the collection. And then
They've
secondly,
recently they've recently reissued that. I've
I
seen
think,
it
yeah, they're
out
going through a
there.
lot of those. I've not seen Love and Rockets reissues other than Express. I think I could be wrong, but
Yeah.
yeah, the
The
Bauhaus stuff they're
Bauhaus,
kind
I
of
just
digging
saw
through.
that.
Yep, which is very cool.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to get an OG. This next one, this album is here at the record store. I can usually count on a copy being available. So if I feel like listening to it, a used copy, I
Mhm.
can grab it off the shelf and throw it on the turntable and listen. But it's always a good seller. I know that you've got a spot in your heart for this album as well. But I've never had a copy, and I always said, well, someday I'll keep one if I get a really nice one coming through. But Jerry Rafferty, City to City, came through.
Mm.
And what is special about this is actually really cool, Steve. It is a 1978, so it's a first pressing, but it's from the Netherlands. And
Okay.
because of that, it is also on red vinyl.
Oh, neat. Yeah.
So, and this thing sounds fantastic for an OG. I mean, colored vinyl from the 70s and 80s was never really that. It was always kind of a crapshoot whether you're going to get something that's going
Hmm.
to sound good. But in this case, it came through and it sounded good. So I thought, you know what? I think it's time. I'll add this in
Yeah.
just because it's one of those albums. I don't want to call it a guilty pleasure, but it most definitely is one that you want to throw on when you need a little bit of a smile. And I know you've always had a kind of a spot for that as well.
Yeah. To me, it ranks as one of my perfect albums. That I mean, any track I play on there, I like a lot.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to have it in there. So, if you folks want to listen in on some of the tracks that we talk about, because we don't include them as sound clips, because YouTube gets a little, and the other podcast side gets a little finicky with copyright, Steve. I find this out all the time, and I know you do too. So
Yep.
rather than risk having our show banned in Uzbekistan, because I know we got a big fan base there.
Generally, Russia and Belarus just do not allow
Yep.
my Sunday morning show
Oh,
to go through.
they don't know what they're missing. But anyway, if you'd like to listen to the music, regardless, you can look in the description of wherever you are watching or listening to this episode. Scroll down a little bit and you'll see a link in there to a Spotify playlist. I know not everybody has Spotify, but at least in the free version in the browser, you can listen in a little bit with some commercials. So you can still get a sampling of what we do, what we're talking about, and you can listen in on that. And today, Steve, no shortage of music that is going to be excellent music that we're going to be adding into that playlist today. I've got a stack here, and when I left the house, I brought some albums from home. So these are ones that don't sit
Uh
at the
huh.
store with me. So these are important ones. These are special ones. These are ones that make me smile because I remember where I was when I first heard them. I remember what I was doing when I first played them. Most of the
Yeah.
time it was on a radio on the air. And I'm talking about 1980s college rock, college radio music. I guess we'll call it that. College rock, college radio. You know, before we had our jangle pop discussion some time ago,
Hmm.
I just always referred to it as college radio music, college radio alternative. But that I guess, and I think I did agree to your rationale on that is a wider umbrella, and jangle pop is certainly something that grew out of that fermenting basin of college radio music that started,
Yeah.
quite frankly, in the late '70s and really came to fruition in the early and mid '80s. And Steve, I get a little misty eyed about this now, but because it's so long ago, but I feel so fortunate to have been there and been in college radio at a college radio station in that time frame. I was a little bit
Yeah.
late to the party, not quite in the early '80s. You know, I graduated in '83, but didn't go to college proper until 1985. And when I
Hmm.
started at college, I still wasn't quite into radio till just a happenstance. I ended up at the college radio station because I was studying broadcasting, and just fell in love with it there. So I came into this in 1985, right in the thick of things, when things were about as cool as they could possibly be for a 20-something-year-old just having a blast with this kind of music.
Yeah.
And it was truly a magical time. And not only that, but the station that I was at, WBKX, you see my old little shrine back there. They're now WUPX in Marquette, Michigan, at Northern Michigan University. But at the time, WBKX was only a 10-year-old radio station, and it played vinyl. So I spun these records on vinyl from 1985, technically through 1990 when I graduated. But then I stuck around for another 7 years as that old guy when I was working television, just volunteering at the station. But it was truly a great time for music, and it was one that just was tremendously, I'll say eye-opening, but I mean ear-opening for me as well. We've talked about this
Yes.
before, about how I kind of came into the 80s with that hard rock, Def Leppard, Judas Priest, AC/DC, Rush, of course. And I really didn't have any frame of reference for what I was in for when I hit college in the mid 80s. And it blew my mind.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. College rock allowed a lot of bands that you would never have heard of, that would have not done anything probably to get noticed.
Yep.
And a lot of these went on to become very, very big bands. And so, they were like part of this college rock until they got signed to a major label. And it's like, oh, they're on a major label now. Oh, and that was just the snottiness that people could get with some of these bands. But it brought them attention because record companies just weren't doing anything with this. I mean, the radio stations were not going to play at the major ones. They're doing the Michael Jackson. They're doing, the yacht, whatever. And so it was exciting that, the college kids wanted their own music. This isn't about taking Jimi Hendrix. This isn't about, the Doors or whatever. We're young. What's our music? And basically it was the beginning of alt rock, which is what it turned into.
Yep. I've got kind of I'd like to think it's an interesting story that goes along with this. And I think I can call up a couple of pictures here as well while I'm doing this. Let me see if I can find this real quick here. So this is a shot of me at this radio station circa 1986 or 87. Very dorky, but I'm spinning vinyl, like I said. Don't look at the cover. I think that's a Rolling Stones that I'm spinning, and it's kind of antithetical of what we're trying to talk about. But regardless, it was still kind of a fun thing to do. But while I was working, there's another shot of me here, as I ended up becoming the general manager of the college radio station and served in that position for 2 years. So that's why I'm wearing a suit. We were going to a board meeting. We're trying to turn the station into an FM station. But still, it was just, like I said, very, very cool. But while I was doing that and working at this college radio station, I also began working professionally. And my first job outside of that, I mean, during my time at college, I worked country radio. I worked an oldies station. I worked a news station. I worked public radio. I was actually a public radio for a couple of years as well at the same college. But I also worked a top 40. And the top 40 station was one of my first jobs professionally while I was working college radio. And at this top 40 station in the Marquette area, they served their music up on what's called cart. These are essentially, it's a endless loop tape cartridge, kind of like an 8-track, shaped like an 8-track. But all of their music and all their commercials were served up on this analog format on a cart. And we, at any given time at this top 40 station, had maybe 400 or 500 carts in the music library, all with an individual song. Some had one or two that we would play, and it was pre-formatted, so we have to play these things in order or whatever. I worked the midnight shift. So for those of you complaining there, midnight shifts were a deal in radio back then. I think I made $3.35 an hour to work from midnight till 5 a.m. every day, and then go to college and go back to school and go work at the other station. But I went into work one night, Steve, and all of the music library was gone. We'd gotten a new program director, maybe about 2 or 3 weeks prior to that. I went in, and instead of a wall of several hundred songs for the music library, there was a short little stack of a couple of them there. And I asked the guy that was on
Mm.
before me, I said, what happened to all the music? And he goes, well, that's it right there. And there were 40 songs. And I said, well, where's the rest of it? He goes, we're a top 40 station. And so, yeah, I know we're a top 40 station, but there's only 40 songs here. He goes, we're a top 40 station. So that was all there was to play. And it was one of the most torturous times. You know, that midnight hour was horrible when you hear Peter Cetera's Glory of Love once an hour because it's the
Yeah.
top one going through, or Walk Like an Egyptian. It's just, it was a true top 40 nightmare for me at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But I had the outlet of college radio to go to at the same time.
Yeah.
So I had that. But your notion that the tightly controlled formatted FM stations, and FM revolutionized radio. I know you've talked about AM, and then FM comes along and it does a little bit better service to the music. But that was the 70s. And now that we're getting into the 80s, all of these bands that are growing out of the post-punk movement, the prog rock movement, just really inventing their own sounds. And none of the radio stations, and I will attest to this, would give them the time of day. They would not pay attention. So these outlets of college radio with young kids who are discovering this music for the first time, saying, this is really damn cool stuff. Why isn't this on the radio? Well, let's put it on the radio. We have the ability. We have the outlet. Let's do it. And that just exploded from there.
It did. And some of it, as you alluded to, beginning, really toward the late 70s is when it began happening. And you would hear, and there was just a couple that were brought up, just a couple early ones, but they became popular in college radio. And one was Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers. Now this one came out in 76, but it was no radio station was going to play it.
Oh, yeah. Well, Pablo
And,
Picasso was never aired on the...
Yeah, that's very true. And television, Marquee Moon. Both of them were more embraced now as these college stations were starting because the music was different.
Yep.
Something that, again, not necessarily going to hear it on FM, not going to hear it on AM because it was its own deal. And that's where the excitement of college radio was at the time is no one will touch this.
Yep.
Because they can't classify it. We want everything classified. We want everything that has to fit into this square peg, square hole. And the music, all these groups were coming out, it wasn't doing it. And
I think
college
another couple
radio
of groups, and I don't have any albums of theirs pulled, but of that right in that tipping point around 78, 79, you've got Devo and you've got the B-52s as well.
Yes.
And the B-52s coming out of Athens, Georgia, which would truly become the epicenter of this movement with a group called REM. And this was one of the groups, and I'll get to a couple others, but one of the groups that just really opened things up for me by the time I got there in the mid-'80s, exactly, with REM. It wasn't rock, it wasn't pop. It was difficult to explain other than just to call it alternative. This is the alternative to what we're hearing on commercial radio right now.
Yeah, I remember a Rolling Stone article when REM was coming out, and they were having a hard time explaining what it is. But they had these guitars that jangled.
Yep. Hence the term jangle pop. I'm with you there.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
And out of Athens, there was the DBs.
Yep.
That came out of Athens. And again, jangly. I don't know. Athens was jangle central, I guess. But,
with the exception of the B-52s. I don't know what they were.
Yeah.
But...
No, B-52s were their own special wild planet going on there. Retro. B-52s, very, very, very retro.
Who would have thought that all these decades later, the B-52s, I mean, they're almost pigeonholed into Rock Lobster. They do other stuff, obviously, but they're still out there kicking that signature.
They sure are.
Now, one thing too to kind of point out, and I want to stick on the radio side of this for just a second, that I think made this special is the fact that these stations had to be sought out. It wasn't something that was readily available. you hear the term a lot of times, left of the dial. And what that means
Mm-hmm.
is that the lower end of the FM dial in the upper 80s and early 90 and the frequencies were reserved for educational purposes, or a lot of Christian stations at the time too. So that's where you'd get your public radio, would be in the lower end, the left of the dial, because back then we actually had to turn the dial, and turning it left took the frequency down into the 80s and 90s. But a lot of the educational licenses for stations were in that bandwidth, in that 80 to 90 range, and through there when they got their assignments. The station that I worked for at the time I was there was what was called a carrier current station. And this is just a tremendously impressive, but nowadays antiquated technology, where the station would backfeed its signal, but instead of sending it to a transmitter, it was backfed into the universities, in this case, Northern Michigan University's electrical system. So that in order to listen to the station, you had to have a radio plugged into an outlet, which would carry the carrier current, carry the signal along with the electricity. It didn't sound good at all. It was a buzz or something from there as well. But that's how a lot of these stations got their start before they started getting lower power FM on those lower frequencies. We were also, I think,
Mm-hmm.
at one point we were carried by cable. So it was FM cable from, at the time it was called Bresnan, where they were still utilities before utilities. Now that's all the way moved up into Spectrum, but that's a way to go. The station that I work for now does have an FM license, but it's a lot different than it was in the day when you had to seek that out. And I think the point I was getting to is that because you had to work so hard to listen to these stations, you ended up being more invested in the music that they were playing. It was a cultural revolution that you had to work for. It wasn't just click, here it is on the internet, I'm listening to it. No, I've got to go through all these steps, and I'm one of 10 people listening to this tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I I was, at least I never had to go through any of that. I was trying to find a lot of my stuff. It wasn't necessarily I was listening to the college rock scene, because I was out of college and everything. But record stores, you were finding this more
Yep.
alternative type music in there, and it was really opening up my eyes. I was reading about it in Rolling Stone at the time, and then other publications that I was getting, and but none of it was on the charts because it just wasn't part of the charts.
Would
Yes,
one of
and
those
CMJ
publications have been
eventually.
the College Music Journal, CMJ?
That Yeah, that one came to me late in the 80s. I mean, and that was the most mind-blowing. Through the 90s, I bought so much weird crap because of College Music Journal. It was all in CD because I couldn't get it in vinyl, but
Yep.
oh my God, the stuff I bought because of College Music Journal and their freaking sampler CD.
I've got a collection of CMJs somewhere, but this one that I'm holding up here is a compilation that was sent out in 1989, and it was CMJ's 10th anniversary, 1979 through 1989. And this is just, it lists, I mean, I can thumb through this and you just see just a who's who of some of the coolest bands in the playlists that went through on here as well. XTC, Bauhaus is on here. Yaz, it's alphabetical. Midnight Oil, Echo and the Bunnymen, the Talking Heads are in this as well. And this is just kind of a countdown of some of you too, some of the greatest acts that College Music Journal, CMJ, was responsible for elevating up to the status that some of these
Mhm.
have grown into.
Yeah, because they you weren't going to find them in charts or anything like that. And there were certain scenes out there that were really, I mean, certain cities that you would not have expected. I just talk about, Minneapolis.
Yep.
Uh, you know, they had, Uskadu, definitely a college radio rock favorite out there. They went from the hardcore into more still hardcore with melody. And I have to show New Day Rising. I had a commenter once goes, what's a video if when you do not show Uskadu's New Day Rising? So
That is only warehouses.
that's
You got to
pretty
go
funny.
further.
So somehow I got to show that every day. But the replacements were,
Yep.
they were just a bunch of snotty kids. And eventually, both Uskadu and Replacements got major label because
Yep.
they finally noticed them. But it was college rock promoting them. There was the Urban Gorillas that came out of there, college rock, the Suburban, Soul Asylum.
Yep.
All that was the Minneapolis scene of all things. But you know, Athens, Georgia was huge. Minneapolis was huge, and the other one, Boston,
Boston did well as
took
well.
off.
Yep.
Yeah, you
One,
had I had the Pixies, out of Boston, Mission of Burma, the
yep.
Liars, the Del Fuegos. All of those were just incredible bands. It's like, gosh darn it, it's just amazing. And so these cities where everyone suddenly the lower not the major record companies, it's all these smaller ones trying to find artists would flock into there and start trying to sign these
Yep.
guys up. They weren't on Warner Brothers, they weren't on United or whatever. They were coming on to IRS or the smaller labels that were
Restless,
struggling,
and
but
yep.
they're looking for.
I had one other point I wanted to make about CMJ, and I just realized that when you're talking, the impact that CMJ had, and the reason that they were able to have impact was because, okay, everybody knows Casey Kasem's Top 40 or the Billboard Top 100, Hot 200, whatever it is, that sampled radio stations. Well, CMJ did that with college radio stations. When I worked for the one in Marquette, every week we would submit we'd have to fax it in, by the way. Every week we would submit our playlist. So we would track the stuff, the new stuff coming in. We would actually track how many times they were played, the reactions to them, and submit that in our top 20 or top 25 played songs, albums and songs, to CMJ, which would then in turn publish them for the rest of the college radio world to see how that compared. So our little station had its little spot in each week's CMJ report saying, here's the top 10, top 20 from WBKX in Marquette, Michigan, and that compares to, all the other stations that were around there. And that is what really helped cultivate it. I mean, it was the alternative top 40, if you will, that CMJ made possible and gave the exposure to these. But yeah, to your point where you said that a lot of these early labels really were at the forefront, you can still see some of these now where these labels have been folded into the major conglomerates of UMG or Warner. But yeah, you have things like Restless that you mentioned, even some of the more heavier punk labels going through there, Touch and Go, or Slash or IRS, which all came under that the Warner umbrella. But it was neat to see that these were getting an outlet at least and getting the airplay that they deserved for the people who were seeking it out. So I've got one here. This is quite probably one of the largest impacts that I'd had, other than REM, was the Violent Femmes and their self-titled first album from 1982 when this came out. I actually didn't get around to discovering this until 85 when I ended up at the college radio station because, again, where else on the radio are you going to hear Blister in the Sun or Add It Up? You're not going to hear Add It Up at all, regardless, because of the F-bomb repeatedly going through there. When I heard this, it was eye-opening and ear-opening, as I said before, because I'd never heard anything like it. Not quite Minneapolis, but Wisconsin, Milwaukee. We're still in that upper Midwest.
Yeah.
But still just a fantastic album and one of the gateway albums for me at the time I was discovering it, along with REM. And dare I say, right at that same time, They Might Be Giants kicking in as well with their first album. All of this kind of stuff. And They Might Be Giants, that one I think was a little bit later. I'm trying to remember the original year on that. But that would have been 83 or 84, I think, on TMDG.
To me, you're missing, I think, one of your gateway albums. Wouldn't that be The Dead Milkmen?
I was holding up on that. The Dead Milkmen and Be Izzle Bubba. Yes, tremendous. This has the distinction, Steve, I think, of Punk Rock Girl, the song, is, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I think that this is probably one of the bridge songs between college radio music becoming a little more mainstream. And that's because of MTV. The music video to this at the same time hitting for and I'm trying to remember the length of time. And there's my punk rock girl, cut, my punk rock girl cutout dolls in the back still that they sent as a promo. This song, Punk Rock Girl, and this was not the Dead Milkmen's first foray. It's not their first go round, but this one broke the charts, and it was on the CMJ charts for months at a time in some varying. When it hit so big, and it hit at the same time as MTV and 120 Minutes were kind of discovering this alternative side of music. And
Yeah.
Punk Rock Girl, I think, is kind of the unlikely hero to kind of help open up that genre of music to a wider audience via the music video.
And the music videos were important even for a lot of these these college radio bands. I'm going to go into the UK. This wasn't just American bands happening here. The UK was putting out a lot of stuff. Again, not top 40 at all. Think of early Cure. It wasn't really till '89 with Disintegration that the Cure became big. Hey, Jim and I, we think the same. For those that aren't watching, Jim and I keep pulling up the exact same albums. So
17 Seconds from the Cure, 1980. Again,
yeah,
one of the ones that was there at the forefront for me when I got around by 85 to catching them. I was like, damn, this is good stuff.
Yeah, and so throughout the '80s, I mean, my first Cure was "Kiss Me, Kiss Me." I remember that came out, but then I began going back and buying back catalog.
Yep.
The Smiths, they were not a top 40 band here, but college radio embraced the Smiths and made it known. MTV was playing the Smiths. Same with Echo and the Bunnymen.
Yep.
And Echo and Bunnyman, a 4 or 5 album run that was excellent, top notch stuff. And then the last one I want to show is Psycho Candy from Jesus and Mary Chain.
Yep.
Just would not, the college radio helped push this stuff and get people to know it. You would see it on MTV, but you're not going to see as much as you would see Thriller.
We're kind of on the same the same track thinking here. I pulled the Cure obviously through there in a couple, but the Alarm, we talked about the new Alarm album a couple weeks back, and
yep.
I do have the majority of the early Alarm stuff that was kind of going through there. Great stuff all the way around. I've got the Cult. I think we're going to throw the Cult in just because a little bit later, we're talking late 80s by the time we got around to this, but still just very cool stuff.
Yeah.
The other side, I've got a few more to show from the American side here, Steve, that I don't think fit the whole jangle pop side of it. But what did I say earlier? How did I put it? Early jangle pop was always college radio music, but not all college radio music was jangle pop, right?
Yeah.
Well, the Cult fits into that. Is Camper Band Beethoven, do these guys fall into the jangle for you? I think they kind of do.
They kind of do. Camper Van Beethoven is their own genre.
Yeah, they are. Key Lime Pie is such a phenomenal album.
They're everywhere, man.
Yeah. Covering pictures of Matchstick Men. The Call, Modern Romans, another important one in my college radio years, was just a fantastic album with The Walls Came Down. Modern Romans, great one. The Smithereens, I've talked about a lot before. These guys, especially their early stuff, was just a different type of sound, and that had a lot to do with Pat Denizio's vocals, just the way that he would sing. And I'm so bummed about this. And I show this off occasionally. This is Guadalcanal Diary and their album 2x4. My copy, the cover, is absolutely just trashed because it had a big sticker on it from a radio station at one point in time, but I keep it because it's a white label promo. But Litany and Life Goes On, this is such a cool album as well.
Mm-hmm. With the Jangle Pop, a big part of Jangle Pop, Paisley Underground. The Paisley Underground was built upon this. And for those that had missed our thing, Jangle Pop really, you look back at the Byrds. The Byrds were a big part. Even Mr. Tambourine, when they did that, the jingle jangle they talked about with the music, kind of going in. But I think of the Rain Parade. The Rain Parade is just an ultimate example of really what you would get Paisley Underground Jangle Pop. The very first Green on Red was very much that. Then Green on Red, great college radio group, went a little more country, but it still fit into the college radio rock format. Very first Bangles definitely was Jangle Pop. This was before Walk Like Egyptians, so they
Yep.
weren't known. You wouldn't find them on major radio stations.
Well, until they hit with that top 40 thing that just haunted my nightmares for weeks at a time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I when then by late '70s I got Rolling Stone. I remember it was toward the late '80s, and Rolling Stone comes out with this big announcement, huge announcement. We are now adding modern rock to their list. They
Yep.
always had the top 40 or top 100, but none of these groups were in it, except for maybe once in a while they would get in, especially they had a major label. So they had to go back and decide, okay, we need to catch up with CMJ
Yep.
because CMJ was promoting this. And so they had the modern rock format. And that was, it took in all these British groups and, groups from all over the world, but also from the US.
Rolling Stone a little late to the party, 'tis the thing, but they have outlasted CMJ.
Yes,
They
they
formed
have.
in, like we said, 79 and were an impactful force for many, many years. But CMJ sadly folded about 2019, ceased
Yeah.
publication about then, and actually folded by 2020. I mean, which you think about it, that's an impressive run for an alt magazine. But I think the internet and the streaming services kind of help do away with what the impact that college radio had. And I think that that's
I
another.
also
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say their format I did a lot when I finally quit subscribing to them, which was getting toward around 2010. I just, they quit the CD. You could download whatever you wanted,
Yep.
on there, but we don't get the CD anymore. And the reviews had gotten so tiny, so small. It just they lost it for me, and then I just forget it.
That
I
was it.
went on from them.
But the means of discovery, and I think that this is something that we have talked about before about how you discover new music, has changed so radically since the early 80s. Because back then, kids, there was no internet, obviously, at that for us at least.
Yeah.
DARPA had it, but we peons couldn't enjoy it. The only means of discovery, as Steve mentioned, was are they playing something different in a record store? And for me, was moving to a city that had a college radio station that I could pick up and easily listen to, where I could discover this stuff. And then through publications like CMJ or zines you could get to, or starting to see concerts and word of mouth, especially. Have you heard this Violent Femmes album? Check this thing out. Here's a tape. Check it out. Now, I think that has obviously changed because of streaming or sampling or YouTube or whatever the case, where people can call up, well, here's this new group. Well, let me check them real quick and see if I like them. And you get a 5-10 second make up your mind in that time. Do I like these or do I not?
Yeah. I just bought a new group last night off. I listened to YouTube. I was watching YouTube, saw this video of a group. Go, wow, I really like this. Went into my Discogs. Okay, I can get this ordered, and bought an album from some freaking group I can't pronounce. But
Well, you
can't
look
wait
at
to get show that one. But
look at Angine de
it
Poitrine as
is.
well. I guess if I'm going to counter my argument that I just made and say that, okay, well, maybe viral exposure, viral videos is the new word of mouth, because look at what it did for Angine de Poitrine, the French Canadian group that burst out earlier this year.
Yep. Yeah. Took off. You know, in college radio, I said, we always talk the 80s because, and I just want to kind of go through what killed college radio.
Okay.
What album killed college radio?
Yep.
Nirvana, Nevermind. Suddenly, everyone went freaking crazy for a good reason. It was a hell of an album, and all the radio stations switched to alternative rock.
Yep.
And so the alternative stuff became mainstream.
Yep.
It really just shook up everything. I mean, think of all the, back then, Jim, how many radio stations were changing their formats. It was absolutely insane in the 90s. And then, well, of course, they keep changing the format. Then all of a sudden, alternative rock wasn't big anymore. Let's go to a new format. And my God. But
By
it makes
the
sense. You got to get advertisers.
yeah, by the time the 90s rolled around, I had graduated from college and was working in television with some ancillary contact to radio. Obviously, I mentioned I was still volunteering at the college radio station. And yes, that is right around the same time where rock stations became classic rock stations. Okay, we're going to play Zeppelin, we're going to play Pink Floyd, but that's called classic rock now. Nowadays, it falls into the oldies category, for crying out loud. But so did the B-52s actually.
Yeah.
But
And everything we just showed.
everything we showed falls into the oldies. When you walk into a supermarket and you hear the instrumental cheesy version of a song you're listening to, it's like, oh, I remember that REM song. Great, now they're making a Muzak version.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I could not agree more that that Nevermind from Nirvana really was that big second tipping point to say, okay, college radio, you still exist, but you're now no longer that cutting edge because the mainstream has now adopted what you had. Thanks for warming the seat for us, college radio. We'll take it from
Yeah.
here.
That's a good point. Yeah. And all the major labels hit the cities. I mean,
Yep.
the smaller markets. I mean, Seattle. Every major label was going to Seattle trying to grab something. Finally, the major labels go, "Oh wow, this stuff sells, huh? We better go out and find it." And yeah, out comes money. Austin. Well,
Yep.
everyone's still heading to Austin. So much music comes out of Austin. We could do a whole video on Austin. It's pretty crazy.
It's definitely a time. I mean, I miss that time period, but I don't think that there's ever a way to go back to that kind of feeling of
Yeah.
hearing something on even a, like you call it pirate radio, but the low power FMs or the carrier current or cable, you just don't get that feeling when you're clicking on something on a stream or on YouTube. I don't. I mean, it's exciting when you discover stuff, but it's not as exciting as it was. And I know I'm sounding like an old man, get off my lawn type of thing. Get off my frequency on the left of the dial, please.
Hmm.
But it's just not the same, especially too, like I said earlier, when so much of this, and we're talking about records, Steve, so we have to say that a lot of this was served on vinyl at that time because
Yeah.
they were pressing that for these stations. And
Hmm.
it was great to get promos. Holy cow, was it cool to get promo copies of stuff. When I was general manager and I was actually music director at the station too for a year, they say, hey, Jim, here, have some 12-inch singles. See what you think. Here's an extra one for you. You guys play this. Let us know what you think. And that was so
Yeah.
cool to have. So, which
I just
oddly
remember back
enough,
then
if
promos
you
were.
notice, is my hype sticker. It's not a promotional copy, but it's promotional in the fact that they sent this to me, the Beelzebub from the Dead Milkmen, with the punk rock girl cutout, the original cutout. And I think I've showed these before. I've got a lot of my old DM newsletters in there as well. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, the
You know,
feelings
uh,
just it's just not the same.
yeah. You mentioned pirate radio, and when I did a thing on AM and a thing on FM two things, the viewers from the UK, a lot of them chimed in
Oh
about
yeah.
pirate radio, which was their college rock.
Yep.
And, that was such a huge part. And they said when they shut that down, for a lot of music kind of died because it was all this cool stuff. Now, John Peel was at least out there doing important things to help
Yep.
promote it late at night.
From within
But
the BBC
it
at that
was,
point. Yep.
yeah, exactly. But it was just trying to get this music out. And again, the college radio just really did a huge job with it. And I mean, MTV couldn't ignore it. So, the videos were coming out. But
Yep.
yeah,
pirate radio is such an interesting sidetrack on this because middle America, the upper Midwest where I'm from, you in the Midwest in Nebraska, these offshore and literal pirate radio stations sitting in international waters about 3 to 5 miles out, broadcasting in, aren't going to reach us in middle America.
Yeah. Yeah. We missed out on a lot of music
Yeah, we
growing
did
up.
in that case. That's why it was important there too. So,
But
Steve,
I
I
did get
mentioned,
Tony Orlando and Don, Jim, and I got
oh,
plenty. I got Captain Tennille, and so I had all that cool stuff on the radio.
it took you, you had to work to discover extra stuff. One other
Yeah.
quick note about the Dead Milkmen, Steve, and Beelzebubba and the song Punk Rock Girl. And this, I'm circling back to my not all college radio music is jangle pop. But there's a line in, and I've even got a little note on the store here, on my little bulletin board where I say, no, Mojo Nixon does not work here. And that's from the line in Punk Rock Girl where they're at the record store asking for Mojo Nixon. And Mojo Nixon falls right in. He passed away a few years ago, oddly enough, on an oldies, it wasn't oldies, but an alternative radio cruise. He had a heart attack on there just a couple of years ago. But yeah, Mojo Nixon and Skid Roper, I've got the Bodacious album. This is not jangle pop. It is not alternative rock. It's not quite, psychobilly rock. It's all of those mixed together. And Mojo did some cool stuff with Skid Roper. And Elvis is everywhere, man.
Yeah. I used to have a couple of their CDs back in the day, but they were different.
Different indeed.
Kind of like a Camper Van Beethoven. In
Yeah,
their own
they fall
way.
into their own. All right, folks. So what do you think? Obviously, this is such a wide genre, wide open. What kind of memories do you have of Discovery? Did you listen to college radio at the time? Were you near enough to a university or a college that was fortunate enough to have a station? Like I said, at Northern Michigan University, where I went to school, we were lucky to have it. Even if it was carrier current at the time when I was there, it was still an experience and it was still a method of discovery and something that opened my brain up from what had been Midwest hard rock type of stuff to holy crap, this is some good music. I love REM. I love the Violent Femmes. I love They Might Be Giants. I love the Dead Milkmen now because of that.
Yeah, it is. It's most when you look at most of my favorite groups came from that special time.
So folks,
Yep.
again, please chime in the comments. Do you have some favorite groups of that era, or do you have some memories of radio and seeking it out? Those of you overseas, pirate radio, good for you, or those of us here, college radio, let us know because we like to hear from you. Doing my best to try to answer some of those, Steve. And I think now that the concert that we did the week before is over, I can settle into a few other things here at the store, and maybe I'll get back to some backlog on comments as well.
Yeah, I know what you mean, man.
Well, your
I got a
pool
lot.
season's only got a little, you're halfway through, I hope, right?
Halfway. You got it. Yes, sir.
You're looking forward to draining them.
Yeah. Nothing more happy. Drain the damn pool. Yay.
All right, well, you folks have been watching and listening to Two Guys Talking About Records, a vinyl community podcast, and this subject, Steve, so near and dear to my heart. I'm glad you thought of this for this week. We were struggling, but that's always good. I want to dive back on this often, so thank you.
Well, folks, I gave Jim a choice: college radio or disco. He went to college radio. So, okay.
We can do a disco episode if you want, Steve, but it's not going to be pretty. So we'll see how that goes.
Hey, that was my college years, man.
Yes. Well, staying alive, right? There you go. All right. You folks have a great week. So until next time, my name's Jim and I own a record store.
I am Steve and I am a record collector.
Thanks. Have a great week.
See you, Jim. Bye, everyone.